I'm Julie Herman of J. Brick Holtz and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Gravity Sew Along. Now that we have cut our shapes, we're going to begin to piece block 3. If you have not yet watched the video on cutting, I suggest you go back and start with that one. It's in the caption below. Now that we have completed all of our cutting, it is time to piece our block. The directions for what I'm showing you are on page 16 of your book. I have laid out my red block and brought my pieces over here to my sewing machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew our triangles to our hexagons to make large diamonds. And I've already done that with some of mine. And let me show you how we do that. We're going to sew our triangles to make large diamonds. And one quick note is pay close attention to the layout diagram in the middle of page 16 to make sure that you put your triangles in the right place, because there are triangles from 2 different fabrics and you want to make sure that they end up in the right place to give the overall final feel of the block. Now that we have that, I know which triangle I'm going to be sewing to my hexagon, and you can keep them labeled, or at this point you can take that off if you'd like. I'm going to place my label back where my block goes on my little design area here so that I can put things back and I make sure that they go in the right place and I don't mix up the locations. I'm going to take my triangle and sew it to my hexagon. I've got my scrap, as you know that I always do. I have my triangle and 1 point is blunt and 2 are sharp. Sometimes it is helpful to blunt those other points, similar to what we have been doing with our diamonds, and sometimes it's actually helpful to leave them. But for now, we're going to take our 1 blunt corner and we're going to use that to do our alignment up here. So that is going to line up perfectly on top of the corner of our hexagon, and then our point is going to overhang here, and our 1/4 inch is going to go right to that valley. And as I've mentioned before, I don't pin yet at this stage. If you find it helpful to pin, please, by all means, go ahead and do that. And so I'm going to take the next one that is right next to it and do the same thing. So again, take my triangle and I'm going to arrange it down here and fold it so that it lines up here. And if you saw, I just rotated this. Orientation doesn't really matter because we have a lot of bias in the whole quilt, but generally speaking, when I have things that I can match up the grain, I do. So in this case, I have my straight grain going across here and here. So I'm going to line that up just as I did with the first one and sew that on. And now for my first one, I have my bottom triangle. So now I need to add a triangle to my other corner so that I have created a large pieced diamond. So I'm not going to worry about pressing or doing anything with this one yet, and it's not in the way. So I'm just going to leave it there and add my triangle on my other side and align it as I did the other 2. And I'll do that one more time. And when you're doing the whole block, you will do this 4 times. I'm going to show you with 2, and then I have the other 2 done. I'll show you what they look like. So this is the result. And just as I have with the other blocks, I like to go ahead and finger press this open and then head on over to the iron and press, not iron, press these seams open nice and flat. And then once I have pressed them open nice and flat, this is what it'll look like. So those seams are nicely pressed open. So now I have my bottom 2 diamonds already pieced and pressed, and it is time to sew them together into a row, and then I will sew my 2 rows together. So these triangles are going to help me later when I'm aligning my 2 rows. So we're just going to leave those. Now I don't have them here for alignment, so you could cut the sharp points off and blunt them, and I will show you in a moment what that looks like. Or you can do what we did with month 1, which is we're going to use the fabric in our seam allowance as our guide for where to align them. This seam here will line up with this fabric in our seam allowance. And I'm going to do what I often do, which is a little bit of thread pinning just to make sure I'm in the right location. So I'd rather take out just a few threads in the middle than the length of the whole seam. Let's go back onto our scrap. And let's see how this looks. All right, looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to sew the length of this piece. I'm going to quickly press these and then show you how we can trim these points if you find that helpful for aligning the two pieces in the row. So I just pressed these, and I want to show you that just as we did in month 1, where we cut points off of our diamonds, we can treat this pieced diamond as a diamond, and we can cut this point and this point off if you find that that's helpful for aligning these to sew into a row. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to simply take this piece and arrange it underneath my Super Sidekick ruler the same way we did with the diamond in month 1, and have it along the line here, and then I can cut my triangle off, and then again I can repeat that for this one, so I'll have those 2 alignment points. And then lastly, I always like to lay everything back out to double check to make sure that I have the fabrics in the correct places. So now I can head back on over to the machine, and I can use these corners to line this up. So as I just mentioned, I'm going to take these 2, and now if you'd like, you can go ahead and pin at those 2 locations and the center. I'm going to go ahead and do my thread pinning because I find that it really just is the best way for me. If you prefer to just sew the length of the seam and hope it turns out, that is okay too. There really is multiple ways to do things. I just find this method works best for me. And there we go, looks great. So now I can use my blunt points to perfectly line up, and I don't have to guess, and I can sew the length of this piece. This one here. And now this needs to be pressed before I can complete the block, and I don't want to turn my iron on just for this little piece, so I am going to use my Violet Craft seam roller. It will get my seam flat enough so that I can complete my block. So there we go. And you can cut these blunt just as we did if that helps you as well. I find that at this point I have enough points to match, but I like to give you all the different tips and tricks so that you can find which ones work best for you. I'm going to line up those triangles on top of each other. I like leaving them in this case because it is nice to have those to line up. And then here I have the triangle from the one side, but I don't from this one because we had cut that off. My triangle from my one side is going to kind of pop up, and I'm going to be able to line up the edge of it with my seam allowance here. Make sure it stays nice and flat on the back side. And just as I have mentioned many times, you could just sew the entire length of the seam or do the thread pinning, whatever you find at this point that is best for you. And those 3 all look great. And again, as I have mentioned before, I do suggest using coordinating thread. I am using this so that you can see it in the videos, but if I was sewing this block just for myself, I would be sewing it with red thread. Now to finish the block, we're just going to sew down the length of the seam and sew right on top of the thread that we already have. No need to add pins. So now I will just repeat these steps with my blue pieces to complete my second block for month 3. And I'll be back here soon to see you in month 4. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to like it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Show us your progress on your gravity blocks in our Facebook group. We'd love to see how you're coming along with your quilt. The link to the Facebook group is below. I'll be back here in the next video to show you how to do your cutting for block 4.